Hi, I'm J.P. Willett. Pastors, judges, therapists, and other professionals all send folks to me during some of the most difficult challenges in their lives to help them turn those things around into opportunities. Here's the burning question all of my clients come to the table with. Why is it so difficult to have a real conversation about important things? I don't know if you've had that question, but I have had that very same question throughout most of my life, at least when it came to my own relationships. I've always been really good at helping other people navigate conflict in their relationships, but I've personally experienced in my own relationships a significant amount of heartache, brokenness, and even a failed marriage. So eventually I got to a point where I realized I had to figure out why I was having trouble with my relationships, why I couldn't seem to work out conflict in my own relationships as well as I could with everybody else's. Not knowing really where to start, I started experimenting a little bit with life. I started being very transparent with everybody. I don't necessarily recommend you try this, but here's what happened for me. I was transparent with people I knew really well, all the way over to people I didn't know very well, including perfect strangers on the street. As you can imagine, I had a lot of mixed results, but I did learn an awful lot about how people relate to awkward situations and difficult communication in relationships. That wasn't enough for me though. I wanted to know more. I wanted to know how I could help more people, including myself, navigate relationships in a way that wasn't just getting by, but that was actually experiencing amazing results and getting everything we possibly could out of life. So I went on to study counseling, psychology, crisis intervention, communication, dispute resolution, and many other subjects, all so that I could bring this to people like yourself. Since then, I've worked with hundreds of clients, helping them navigate their relationships using the tools that I've learned from my own life to make positive changes in their lives. It's become a great joy for me to teach the essentials of effective conflict resolution so that you can actually turn pretty much everything around in your life. To effectively resolve conflict, it's important to know the basic elements of conflict and how they affect your mind, your body, and your relationships. So let's get started with some basics. The four elements of conflict that are involved in all conflicts all across the board are a difference in desires, and sometimes that's real or sometimes that's just a perceived difference. A response to that difference, which can be a positive response or a negative response depending on how you're relating to the conflict. A plan toward a solution based on your response, and that plan can either be divisive or it can be collaborative, and we've all experienced either one. And then actually the action of carrying out that plan. And carrying out that plan leads to a successful resolution, which we all like to see, or it leads into what I like to call a cycle of destruction. And it looks like this. And many of you have experienced this in conflict. It goes around and around and around and around, and we can't figure out why. I want to help you with that today. But as you can see, with the four basic elements of conflict, conflict can be either good or bad. So why does it always feel so bad? Why does the word conflict evoke so many negative emotions in people? I think when Abraham Maslow came out with his hierarchy of needs and identified 5 basic levels of need common to all humanity, he really hit on something very important. See, at the bottom level is our physiological needs, our food, our water, the things we actually need to survive and make it through the day. The second level is safety. That means I'm not going to get eaten by a dinosaur or a bear or run over by a truck while I'm making this video. I'm on the second floor of a building. Not a good chance of that happening. The third level is where most of us get stuck, is love and belonging. And I'll hit that in a minute. The fourth level is self-esteem, and the fifth level is self-actualization. Many psychologists argue that none of us ever actually reach self-actualization. I would differ on that, but we can debate about that later. Let's talk about love and belonging. Because you're watching this video, I'm assuming that you've got the first 2 levels of need already met. You are relatively safe, and you've had your food and water at least up until this point of the day. For me, I'm safe, I've been fed, I've got my water here on the table, I'm on the second floor of a building, no chance of getting hit by a truck, at least not that I'm aware of. If you're in danger or you're starving, I suggest there are better things for you to do right now than watching this video, although this may help you navigate whatever situation got you there. So let's talk about love and belonging as a basic human need. I will be so bold as to say that most, if not all, conflict boils down to a threat to our sense of love and belonging. Think about it. When you get your hackles up, something's being threatened. And as we identified earlier, conflict typically starts with a difference or a perceived difference in individual desires. So when your desire crosses with somebody else's desire or even somebody else's basic need, the hackles go up and something is threatened. And generally it's our sense of being loved or our sense of belonging. So let's talk about how that plays out. There's this part in our brain called the amygdala. It's most effective at protecting us in times when we're in danger. So when we're in that safety area where that need's not being met, the amygdala kicks in, it shuts down all the other parts of the brain that aren't necessary for mere survival at this point, and our fight or flight response kicks in. Most of you have all heard of that, fight or flight response. And if, say we're getting pursued by a bear, the amygdala tells us, forget about all the other things you know about bears. Forget about the teddy bear you had when you were a kid that you really loved. Forget about the documentary you watched where bears are graceful, peaceful creatures. In this scenario, you're about to get eaten. So you either get out of there or you pull the trigger. That's what our amygdala is really good at. The problem is that our amygdala often treats relational conflict just like it does a safety situation. So when our desires cross with somebody else, oftentimes our amygdala kicks in, and that has to do with different things that we've learned growing up about whether conflict is actually safe or not. But regardless of why it happens, it typically happens in all of us. So the amygdala kicks in, and even if we're physically safe in a situation, our brain tells us that the other person is a bear. And you either pull the trigger or you get out. Well, oftentimes we pull the trigger. All the things we need to teach us about what to say in these certain situations where it's all about self-defense and survival start to come out of our mouth because our amygdala is only pulling from those resources that protect us and that keep us from getting eaten. So when we pull that trigger, this is how we get into what I call the cycle of destruction. It looks very much like the elements of conflict, only it's all the negative pieces. So, our individual desires cross. It begins with the desire, and what happens is our desire is not met. But we're typically very invested in that desire because it's typically a good desire. None of us walk around with bad desires. Maybe some of us do, but if you do, you're probably not watching this video because you don't acknowledge that you want to resolve conflict better. So typically your desires are good. You can justify your desires, and when they're not met, it actually kind of hurts. It's kind of personal when, why would you refuse to meet my good desire? Or why would you stand in the way of my good desire? And when the amygdala kicks in and treats this as an adverse situation, it doesn't have to be, but our brains sometimes tell us it is until we retrain it otherwise. So the amygdala kicks in and our desire becomes a demand very quickly. Well, if you're not going to meet my desire of your own accord, then I will try to force you or convince you to do so. So I'm demanding now that you meet my desire. And when that happens, I like to say we step into the dark side. Once we step into the dark side, we're in our own world that's focused on our own good desires. And we no longer see other people as individuals with their own desires, their own needs, their own wants, their own emotions. We see them as tools or barriers to meeting our desires. So once we've stepped into the box, I'm now looking at my spouse or my coworker or my employee or my neighbor as a tool or a barrier. And if you're a tool, then I just need to hit harder until you work correctly. If you're a barrier, then I just remove you. Does that sound familiar in any of your conflicts? So once we've established that, this person is now a tool or a barrier, then we can make a judgment on that person. If they continue to refuse to meet our demands, then we can judge that because our desire is good, there must be something inherently wrong with this other person. There must be something wrong with their desires. We start coming up with all kinds of assumptions, and our amygdala is still turning wheels here, so it's still pulling from all the resources that are telling us that this person is not in our best interest, and they are not a good person in general. So we cast judgment on them. I have good desires. I'm typically good, so you must be typically bad, or at least in this situation, you're a bad person. So then we feel totally justified in carrying out an action, which is typically some form of punishment. Now, call it what you will, we like to punish people when they don't meet our demands. And that can be as simple as giving them the cold shoulder. Or for some things that I've seen, I've spent a lot of time in small claims court, in family court. I've worked with a lot of different situations, even outside the court system. Lighting trash cans on fire, stealing cars out of the driveway and running them into other things, taking all the dog poop out of your yard and throwing it into somebody else's yard, and then that person turns around, bags it up, and puts it back on your front porch. Wasn't me, I promise, but I've seen it happen. So we like to punish people because somehow that helps us get a sense of resolution, but really we know it's not accomplishing anything. And so we're unresolved. We're kind of tormented by this conflict that is ongoing, and we don't know how to deal with it. It's awkward, it's yucky, it's messy. There are ways to break this cycle going on in your brain and to retrain your amygdala to actually focus on the things that it's best at, which is protecting your safety. I've created 4 videos that walk you through how to transform conflict in your life into opportunities for great results. These are the principles and methods that I've walked all of my clients through, and I'm going to give them to you for the very low price of free. Seriously, free. I'm not going to charge you for this. I love teaching this stuff, and I want you to see results in your life. I want you to see conflict transformed, because the more people that catch on to this, the better the world around me is going to be. And if you'd like to take a little more time to mull over some of the stuff that I talked about in this video, go ahead and download my quick guide to getting your head straight in conflict. And that'll walk you through some tools and techniques to kind of calm down the amygdala and really be able to focus, especially preparing for going into the videos that I'm about to share with you. So thank you, and I hope to see you in the next video.